Can I ask you as well, like if we're talking about NVIDIA, and we can dive into, some of the nitty-gritty about them moving forward in just a few seconds, but everyone is now suggesting that, all of these hyperscalers, they're going to be scooping up all of the chips, and then they're going to be able to charge, rental for people to access their services, and that's where they're going to make their money on the back of what NVIDIA is doing. Is that going to be sustainable, though, for all of the companies that do need to rent that compute power? Because, this is a huge amount of capex, and then you'd have to expect that the companies that are trying to hop on to this compute power are going to be able to afford to pay it, when realistically, it's right now, the big firms that have the money and the smaller firms, they're startups. Can they make enough money off the back of having to pay big money to access it?
I think you've really hit probably the most topical aspect right on the head, Will, in terms of where are the ROIs, where are the ROIs to be able to justify this continued spend? Because in the end, someone does have to pay for it. And so we are seeing those massive capex escalations come through those hyperscalers to build out those capabilities. If you have a look at a Microsoft, their capex has gone from 20 billion in 2019 well into the 40s this year and probably going up from there. So you do need to see that monetization. Now, I just spent 2 weeks, a week in the US, then a week down through Asia. And I think what is encouraging, there'll be two legs to that monetization. First of all, there'll be the new products that will be created on the back of AI. And with some of those products, you are starting to see them emerge, but I do think they will take a little bit longer to really generate the revenues and the returns that people really expect. But I think what's encouraging is you're starting to see some of the applications generate returns through cost saves and efficiencies. So already some companies really working through some simplifications in terms of their back-end processes. Some companies talking about we don't need to hire at the same amount as what we thought previously, given the efficiencies we're giving through AI. And even we had an oil and gas company in our office yesterday talking about just being able to eke out these incremental efficiencies in terms of wells, how to design the wells, how to extract the gas, just from applying that AI and that interrogation of the data that they currently have, which is being facilitated by some of the advances that we are seeing in AI. So it's not just purely about, a Microsoft 365 Copilot, here's the new revenue. There's also the efficiencies that are being generated by the application of AI that we are already starting to see emerge through some companies.
And completely to that point, isn't there still though a concentration of, players that are actually have the capabilities in order to take advantage of all of this? Because if we're talking about, I'm thinking of the likes of a Palantir, because I know they've got a lot of business when it comes to oil services and when it comes to the mining industry, and they understand how to assess the data, what inputs to put in order to get the outcomes that they're looking for from these AI systems. But we don't necessarily have a lot of players within those kinds of realms that has this immediacy of opportunity when it comes to productivity at the same time. So isn't it, I think the point that I'm trying to make is, rather than a scattershot, people need to be incredibly selective and look at who can actually deliver on the promise of those services that you're talking about, as opposed to saying, okay, I'm going to buy C3 AI because it's got AI in the name and just because. And I'm not hating on C3 AI, just to make that clear.
No, I take your point, yeah. No, I think you are right. And that's what's really interesting about this in terms of a technology platform shift. Like normally you do have a shift, and what it does is it opens up the universe for a whole lot of new players to come in and displace the incumbents. Whereas this time what we're seeing is that, if anything, it's those incumbents that have the capital and that have the really deep data pools, have the existing customer relationships, that are the ones that in the immediate term look like going to take the majority of the benefits, and it's where you're seeing the earnings currently come through. So I think you are right that this time around, those smaller players are finding it more difficult just because of the sheer amount of capital required and that breadth of data sets to really take the most advantage that you possibly can when it comes to AI.